Chess, Fate, and the Dawn of AI.
Yeah.
I'm Michael, aka Mishi, as Erik calls me, from Flashpoint. And Erik is a very, very dear friend, the co founder and CEO of chess.com. And we'll talk about a lot of things today. Erik, thank you for doing this.
I'm excited to spend time with you. Thanks for coming and visiting us here at our crazy office and for spending a little bit of time with us talking about things that I love, which is chess and AI and technology and business and life.
I suppose life is probably the most important out of all of these topics, but we'll actually start with chess. As you know, I played chess as a kid and fell in love with the game, and then at one point had this crazy idea that it would be great to connect my passion for the game with something on the business side, and sought out various chess companies, including yours. But why chess for you? How did you connect with this beautiful game? I mean, I suppose in the US it was never as popular as in Eastern Europe, where I come from.
Yeah. I grew up in California, and chess was not really on my radar. From the time, well, my mom taught me when I was 8, and then never really played again. I think I remembered how the pieces moved, but it was in my subconscious, but 10 years almost. And then my grandfather and I, right before I went off to college, my grandfather and I were playing lots of different games, and chess came up, and he started to explain a couple things, and I was like, this is crazy. This is deeper than I thought, but very surface level. And then pretty much immediately after that, I started at the university, and I happened to meet the chess club president as he walked by and saw us playing and challenged us to a game and destroyed us. And I was like, wait, what? There's something to this game. And it immediately drew me in, and I went down the rabbit hole buying books and studying, and I just was blown away by the simplicity but complexity, the applicability of the game to life, where you have openings and strategies and tactics and end games and time management. It's the most vastly, infinitely interesting game. And I fell in love with it. And then, just fast forwarding, I then started, when you learn it, you want to teach it, started teaching kids. And then the teaching kids business, I started a business around it, not just one or two, but whole businesses. I taught 50,000 kids or more how to play chess at my time in the university as a side business. And then that led me to an opportunity of buying and selling chess equipment, and the internet was happening, and we became the biggest online chess retailer. And I did that also with the guy who taught me chess, Jay, and was our co-founder. And then he became also my co-founder at chess.com, which is my third chess business, where we wanted to build a social networking and platform to kind of where chess players could feel at home. And so I've had this evolution of falling in love with the game as a player, and then as a teacher, and then as an equipment provider, and then as as a digital platform. And I've just basically spent the last 25 plus years of my life in love with the game.
Given your early success, and I know that it gave you essentially the opportunity to go to Stanford, right, and study. I'm sure you had lots of other opportunities, right? I mean, you were mid-2000s in the Bay Area when, Facebook, Google, all of these companies were happening and exploding. Why chess? And do you think about how your life would have turned out if you took any of those other opportunities, which I'm sure you've had?
Yeah, I mean, one of my friends and classmates at Stanford is the chief operating officer of Meta, Facebook now. I had a job at Palantir, and they wanted me to stay around after, and when I graduated and take a job. I had job offers at YouTube. So I had a lot of interesting job offers and opportunities, but I was really in love with chess, and I very much wanted to do my own thing. I'm not sure I'm employable. So even though there were some opportunities there, I do think, what would my life look like if I worked at Palantir or at Facebook or YouTube or Google? There were so many possibilities. And I'm just grateful that, I was supported by friends and my wife especially to follow my passion and take a chance on chess. And then it took a chance on me, I guess, as well. And we've had a really beautiful relationship together to go out and in many ways just enable and kind of transform modern chess. And I say that with humility, but also a recognition that the platform and the brand and the product that we've built have changed chess forever.
I mean, the start of chess.com, as I understand, was the purchase of the domain from a bankruptcy auction.
Yeah.
Do you think it was fate that sort of led you there? I mean, you knew chess, right? But sort of still, given your other options that were available to you after, Stanford, it's sort of a surprising move to go and buy a domain of a failed company at the bankruptcy auction.
Yeah, I mean, there's many ways you could look at that. You could say like, oh, it was just like coincidental. I was in the chess space, like I happened to know about it, and so there's just like, oh, it was just like an obvious move based on the pieces on the board, right? The other way, you could go completely bonkers the other way and say that it was fate that led all this and happened and things happened and like, the universe manifested that this would happen from some cosmic consciousness. I don't know what the real answer is. Like, I'm open to whatever the possibility is, but I do feel like that this opportunity opened up in front of me and Jay and Danny and then Brennan and there's so many people, and you coming in, like so many people have been part of this chess.com journey. And I think it would be hard for me to look at it all and just been like, oh, this was very much like nuts and bolts, ones and zeros execution without a little bit of like fate involved in that.
Were you nervous when you were buying that domain? I mean, it was significant money for you at the time, no?
I would say one of my superpowers is just like not being nervous about things. Like I don't have a lot of self-doubt. I don't feel afraid of trying things. I'm not afraid of failure because it's just learning. I'm not afraid of losing because it's just learning. So I also was very fortunate to have more money than most people because I'd already started, 2 chess businesses. And so, I knew it was a good investment. I don't know. I wasn't very nervous, to be honest. It seemed like a no-brainer to me.
Well, especially with hindsight.
Of course, with hindsight.
Yeah. Okay, but you also started other businesses at the time, right? I mean, I remember even when we started chatting, exercise.com was still in existence, even though you were probably already full-time focusing on chess at the time. So when was the time when you understood that, chess is the thing and that you have to give up other stuff, including exercise?
Yeah, we started exercise.com in like 2009 because even though chess was like growing, we thought it had like very limited potential, which partly because chess hadn't hit a boom yet that it has had now, partly because everybody at Stanford and at Silicon Valley and was telling me this was like never going to be anything worth it. And we were like, okay, well, maybe we should go into a bigger market because that was kind of, always like, oh, what's the total addressable market? What's the TAM? How big can this business be? Oh, the fitness industry's big. Maybe you should go into that. A lot of people are searching for chess, but way more people are searching for exercise. Let's do exercise.com. And like, we bought the domain name for 10 times the amount of money that we bought chess.com for. It was like $500,000. And we're like, we built a website, we built these things. And like, I didn't use my own product, I did start exercising. Before that, I was like completely out of shape. So that's one gift I got out of it. But, it turned out that like it just wasn't a product market match. Like the fitness industry is really hard because it's like constantly people churning and like you're selling things that, promises that are hard to keep. It's just like not a market I liked. And meanwhile, chess continued to grow during the 2 to 3 years that we were trying exercise.com. And so finally I'm like, man, I don't like this exercise business. I don't like the fitness space. Chess is growing. This is where my heart is. And we went back to doing chess.com.
I mean, to me, what's interesting always is how sort of, looking backwards, right? It all makes sense. I remember that when I met you, you were very much into CrossFit.
Yeah.
So I guess that was sort of the influence of exercise.com and you becoming fit and sort of realizing that it's important in your life. Yeah. But in some ways, I feel that there is a lot of similarity between exercise and chess, because chess is also exercise, right? It's also about learning. You're just and making yourself better. You're just focusing on sort of your brain,
Yep.
on the mental side of things. Do you think that what you've learned being a chess player helped you in your business life? Are you like applying any of the things that you gleaned, sort of, you know, the strategies, like the mental approach, in your business life and in your life in general?
I'll say yes and no. Let me start with the no, which is I think a lot of the skills and habits I had as a person, things I learned from my parents, from my community, from my upbringing and education, those were skills that I had, and I brought them to chess, I brought them to business, and those are things like, you know, focus, diligence, you know, study, constant improvement. Like those are all things that like I kind of brought into, you know, this world, both to business and chess. That said, in getting deeper into chess, I learned about like mission and passion. I learned about, you know, how to structure thoughts a little bit more with like, you know, what's the primary line, right? I do this, they do this. What are the next options? Okay, we'll get to a quiet position there where we can reassess. So there were a lot of things about how I learned to think as a chess player that I actually have brought into my life that kind of worked together with the other skills that I brought in. And I love talking about that now because I think that chess, you know, can identify what a lot of those great habits are and those success factors for the game of chess, for business, and for life. And they're all like interrelated. And I did learn from the game and also, again, brought skills to it.
So do you believe that, you know, chess is a great educational tool and should be like, I don't know, part of the curriculum as it is in some European countries, for example? Like, you know, compulsory part of the curriculum for kids?
I think so for sure, but maybe not for the reasons some people think. For example, does chess like make you smarter? Like maybe, but sometimes it's not really taught that way. Sometimes it's like memorize openings and like if you lose it's bad or like whatever. Like there's a way to teach chess that's just about getting good at chess, but there's a way to teach chess or enjoy the game of chess or work with the game of chess that actually can come to life lessons. For example, spending time evaluating a position, that's something you want to bring to all the decisions in your life. But if you don't make the connection between those necessarily for kids, like they may not learn it. But like, you know, they tell kids like sit on your hands so you don't like impulsively do something. Like you have to kind of teach chess in a way that has the life lessons built into it. Being a good sport when you lose, preparing for your game, recovering from losses emotionally, learning from when you lose rather than rage quitting, and like there's a whole bunch of life lessons that chess has for you, but I don't think you necessarily get those just by innately playing the game of chess. Those are things that you have to like kind of glean, as you said earlier, like from the game. And I think we can all do more to do that. You know, we try to do that at Chess Kid, our platform. We try and focus on these positive messages. But so anyway, I think chess has a lot to teach us, but it has to be, you know, more intentional.
Maybe sort of changing paces a little
Sure.
bit and moving on from chess to our next subject. The question that sort of unites everything in a way is that I remember when I decided to connect my chess passion with my business investing passion, I sort of tracked down essentially all of the companies that were visible in the market at the time. It was, you know, ChessBase with its play chess product, and ICC was still sort of quite active and well known at the time. Also, there was a South African company called ChessCube, and everyone wanted to speak. And chess.com was actually incredibly hard to track down. The only person that I managed to get in touch with was a guy called David Bruce,
Yep.
whom we both know. And after many months of trying to convince him to talk, eventually I was passing through San Francisco and I managed to meet with him and, you know, explain to him who I am and what I do, and asked him to connect with the main people at the company. And he was so reserved. He didn't disclose any names. he said, let me talk, to the main people and let's see if there's any interest. And then a couple months later, he came back to me saying, he spoke to you and connected us. And you were also quite reserved, essentially. And then you said, I'm in Spain. I think you were in Seville.
Yeah.
And, if you really want to learn about me, you should why don't you come out and visit me? And that's what I did. And I remember that we scheduled a meeting for an hour at some coffee place.
It was a Mexican restaurant.
Mexican restaurant, okay,
Which
yes.
was weird, a Mexican restaurant in Spain. But
And then we ended up spending the next, 7-8 hours together, probably, right? And really hit it off. But my question is, why were you so hard to reach? Was your experience with VCs around chess that bad that you gave up on the VC track for chess? Why was the company so enclosed?
Yeah, I think I had a little bit of a hangover of disappointing interactions with investors. I like you, but I don't really like a lot of investors. That's the truth. I think, and I've evolved as I've gotten older and dealt with more investors and understand the dance between the motives behind investors and builders. And I think they can kind of touch and run parallel at times, but they diverge at times. And I was aware of that. Returning capital to shareholders is just not top of mind for me, but it is for, somebody who's managing a bunch of LPs. So I was leery. I didn't really want to bring somebody into our organization whose kind of mission was different from ours. Our goal was to serve the chess community, grow the game, be the best possible place to work. Those are our missions now and kind of were still back then. And so, then to bring somebody in who's no, the number one mission is return value, create value for shareholders. It was just it wasn't exciting to us. And I just didn't need somebody coming in and telling us oh, all of your plans that you're doing to build chess product, focus more on ads, monetization. I just didn't really want that influence in our company. We didn't need it. And I just think it'd been that kind of ship sailed. I don't really want that influence in there. And that's actually still true today. But I have actually found certain investors and partners along the road who traveled closer to what our mission was. We are still very much focused on our mission and have found investors who've kind of said, okay, I think if we align with chess.com's mission, the shareholder value will increase. So we'll approximate kind of to that. And that's worked.
Yeah, I also think you're the kind of person that doesn't really like pushy people. And I think investors often come across as pushy people because obviously they have to deploy money, right? Yeah. And they, as you rightly said, they're chasing returns, right? And they have to return capital to their investors. So they have strict goals and performance indicators. And yeah, it's difficult to align that with a mission that chess has and some other companies have, right? I always felt that the best business is when, you do the business, you do the mission, the product well, and the financial success is a byproduct of just you doing your job really well, right? The customers love you, and in the end, this brings financial success. But especially with chess, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, the horizon wasn't clear, right? I don't think it was clear for you when you bought the domain. Probably this is why you started exercise.com, also feeling some external pressure, right, from your peers, from the community in which you were in the Bay Area. And then even as I invested, it wasn't clear what the horizon is. And I don't know, even today maybe, it's not clear what the horizon is, right?
Yeah.
It's an eternal game. It could be a very long horizon.
Yeah.
My next question is about secondaries. I mean, today, as you know, I run the direct secondaries business in Flashpoint. And chess.com was actually our first secondary investment.
Yep.
Even though the business was quite small at the time. I remember that revenues were maybe $4 million in 2012, something like that.
Sounds about right.
Business was already profitable.
Yep.
You guys were distributing dividends on a quarterly basis out of those profits. And given how small the business was and that it didn't really have any VC investors, it was completely private. It wasn't, and still wouldn't be today, your natural secondary play, right? So now, sort of looking backwards, do you think taking secondary money for founders makes sense at an early stage? What is the right moment, sort of, to take money in secondary form?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think that's more of like a personal question than a business question, because taking secondary doesn't, selling secondaries doesn't really benefit the company. But I think it benefits maybe the psychology of the ownership, right? That they can stress less about certain things and focus more on certain things. And I think for me, when you came along, again, I had 4 kids at the time, partly had left the Bay Area because I was, frustrated with housing prices, which are even worse now. And so it was like, you came along and were like, hey, we want to own part of this business. Here's some money, and it's going to go directly to the founders. And I was like, oh, wow. If we could take some of this money, I can get into a house, like stabilize, and then like not worry about it. And then I can really focus on operating the business. That made sense to me. And so I think in some scenarios, it makes sense to do that. And I think it can help founders focus on their business, feel some reward, maybe share with the employees as well, which we did in later secondaries. And I think it's very positive. I think, just taking money for the sake of taking money, premature. Probably the amount of equity I sold to you at that price and valuation today is I lost out on, it's been 50, 100x the value that but was it the right move at the time? It was. Do I, in hindsight, be like, oh, was that a great, and it wasn't a good deal for me. It was a better deal for you and investors. But those are the sides of the coin that you take at the time. Our company just happened to like explode in value by significantly, since I sold my shares. But again, I don't look back on that with any regrets. It's like a chess move. You make your move. There's no takebacks. You made the best move you could at the time when you made it. And like sometimes you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. But I'm glad I did, because it helped me then depressurize and focus on the business. And at the end of the day, what am I going to do with more and more money? Like, money is not the end game. Like, money is like not the most important scoreboard in the world. And so having just like a little bit more money, like, I don't know, it's not the right thing.
I very much like what you said in the beginning, because I feel that especially today, companies need sort of more time and more success.
Yeah.
For people to be able to monetize that success, for the founders to be able to take something off the table for themselves. And as you rightly said, you want to improve the living conditions of your family, right? That helps you to de-stress and then be able to focus on how do you build the business further without any worries. Obviously, if you take too much money, then you don't need the success. Maybe it kills your hunger. So it's about the right amount of money, right? And, depends on the circumstances what the right amount is.
I think it really depends, though, on what the motivation is of the person, right? Money has never been the driving factor for me at Chess.com. We have a mission. We're trying to do those things. I think there are people for whom starting a business is just, let me start a business that I don't personally care that much about, but it's a good business opportunity and I'll make some money. And maybe for them, a secondary, it means something different from, a mission-driven founder and builder. I think these are different. And it's not like one is better than the other necessarily, but they are like different. They're different motivations. And so I think as an investor, I would be looking at like, oh, what's the motivation of this person? How does my investment, change that? And I think sometimes from an investor's point of view, thinking always with like the lenses of making money, dealing with maybe somebody like me, I know our current investors sometimes are like, I don't understand how we can't control what's going on more with money, and it's like, well, at some point, like, it just doesn't matter. Anyway, so I think there's an interesting interplay there.
Yeah, I like very much what you said, because I think that's, as an investor, that's the hardest bit, to judge motivations of people,
Yeah.
right? And motivations of founders. And you're right that there isn't a recipe for success.
Yeah.
The paths, like in a chess game, right? The paths can be different to winning in life and in business. But I can certainly say that I haven't noticed any decrease in your motivation after our deal. I felt that, and we've done several transactions, right? I think that we had like maybe 3 separate transactions in the first couple of years when we bought secondaries, both from you and from some of the other employees. And I felt that all of the people, remained super motivated, very focused on the task. And that was, great to see. But maybe also to get some feedback from you. So as I joined, as an investor, as an advisor, right? Did you get what you've expected from me as sort of, a person who became a part of the journey? I mean, obviously, I helped you to de-stress, as we discussed,
Yeah.
right? But, were you expecting anything else? And should people be expecting anything else from investors, from secondary investors?
I think it's a great question. I think I didn't really know what to expect. I think I hoped that you would just go away a little bit, so that we could just do what we were doing. And then I think, as I look back at like the different investors that we've had over time, sometimes there was just like a little bit of an irritant at times, asking certain questions that maybe I didn't want to answer, or hey, what about you think about this, or what's your org chart, or what's the goals, what's your forecast? And I'm like, don't bother me with these things. Like, let me just do what we're doing. But I have to say now, like 20 years on, that you and other investors that we've had, like that little bit of like irritant, not too much, but not nothing, has made us grow so much as a company, and has really provided like best in practice in certain areas. Like, okay, let's nail down what our forecasting looks like. Okay, I see the value in why we're doing that now. What does your org chart look? Okay, I understand that now. And he wasn't pushed too hard, but it was like introduced as these questions that made us grapple with things that maybe we didn't want to look at a little bit. And so, as much as I, hate to admit it, I've grown so much from like the questions and like gentle nudgings of investors, and that that's the push that they've pushed onto me sometimes, and then the pull that I've had has been also super valuable. Like, I've pulled on you when we had another transaction, right? I pulled on you for, some advice early on. I pulled on, our current investors for best practices for, financial operations with our CFO, and we have this PR crisis, and they have a PR team. What do we want to do? Different monetization things. Let us share some playbooks that we've gathered from other companies and put together in these resources. So I think both the push on us and the pull that we've had, like from all the different investors, and you included, has really helped us grow. And so, would we be today where we are today without investors? I don't think we would. I think we would be less organized. I think we would probably have strayed more than we wanted to from like, really delivering like a great experience for users and things. And it really helped us hone in. So I have to admit, it's been very positive.
Happy to hear that. And, definitely I agree with you that business is a contact sport, right? So similarly in life, you have to understand that learning is about sort of getting into your discomfort zone,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, we did create a certain amount of discomfort, hopefully not too much,
Yeah.
right? But if it's just enough to make you get better, that's good. But I actually have to say that one of the things that I always enjoyed about our interactions is that you were always incredibly direct, right? And sometimes I came with questions and you would just push back, and you would actually tell me, I'm not going to answer these questions, go away. right? And then some other times you would listen, but it was always very honest and very direct. And I've enjoyed that, that there wasn't any sort of what's the right word?
Yeah, I think I like to say, like, be clear and kind at the same time, right? Being direct doesn't mean being unkind or being rude. It just means being clear. It's just like, this is the facts, this is my honest beliefs, and you can do it in a kind way. My wife has helped me add the kindness part. I got the clarity from my Dutch ancestry, very direct people, and I got the kindness from my wife, and so I really try to be clear and kind, and I like to be very transparent about what we're doing, how I'm thinking, what I'm thinking about. And that's something that always, like, I was nervous about investors because I felt like I was always very upfront about what I wanted, what I was doing. I would tell the truth all the time. And I did feel like sometimes, not with you and not with our current investors, but I kind of got the sense that, like, investors were always telling me what they thought I wanted to hear. And I just don't trust people who do that. I trust people who are very clear and honest about what's going on. So I tried to find investors who I felt like treated me that way. And anyone who didn't, I didn't take a second meeting with. And those that I felt like did, I took more meetings with.
You mentioned that, you can look at it in a way, sort of at our joint journey, that our entry was very lucky. And I would agree with you. I think, we definitely entered before anyone in the valley or anyone in the world actually understood that chess could be a really big thing, right?
Yeah.
I was ahead of the curve in some ways. But on the other hand, I think that on the exit side, I was much less lucky because exited maybe too early, sort of before the wave came. I've heard someone in the VC world mention that, the real fate or luck or skill, you can look at it in various ways, in venture capital investing is catching the wave. And chess.com certainly caught a wave, but we've exited a significant portion of our position in 16 and 18 before the wave came. And I remember the company was going through this painful, refactoring exercise at the time. And we've already investors and shareholders for a number of years. As we mentioned, there are external pressures, right? My LPs were getting nervous and tired a little bit maybe from the journey. So we had to look for a partial exit. So here's my question for you. Do you think that as a founder, you should be influencing the decision making of your investors about buy and sell? Because I remember we had a lot of conversations at the time, right? And you definitely let me do what I had to do, for which I'm very grateful to you, actually. But I feel like, you could have been a little more adamant at not letting me go. And then I would have made so much more money.
I love that you're slightly blaming me for letting you exit. No, I'm kidding. Everyone can do what they want in this world. They just have the consequences or outcomes of the decisions they make. I think investors are too short-sighted, and their timelines are too short in general. Like, I think the capitalist structure we're in now is kind of fundamentally, like, broken a little bit. Like, how valuations work, timelines of returns. It doesn't really sometimes give patience to, the process that it takes to create a great company at times. And some companies, go really big, really fast, but some just take a long time. And, so as an operator and entrepreneur, I think investors are too impatient at times. But I also understand I'm also an LP in different funds, and I've invested some of the money I've made, and sometimes I'm like, when am I ever going to see this money again? Like, I don't know. And so it is a strange dance between the push and pull. You're an intermediary between other people's money to you, to me, to back to you, to back to them. And so I understand there's dances there, but I wish there was a world with more patient capital, and I don't know how we transition to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely agree that the VC model has its problems, and one of the big problems is that funds are dated,
Yeah.
right? And so basically, in 10 years after the inception of your fund, you have to return capital. I mean, today, the market is coming up with new ideas
Yeah.
on how to help VCs, people who manage money, to repackage these funds,
Yeah.
right? There are continuation vehicles, there are direct secondaries,
Yep.
which is the business that I do now,
Yep.
which sort of helps to bridge this gap to a degree, manage the various horizons that sort of different shareholders have. But you know, I certainly feel that I was unlucky with the horizon, right? And it definitely kept me from being able to enjoy more of your journey. But look, I'm incredibly grateful. Don't get me wrong, right? And I feel that that the journey has been phenomenal. And so, moving on a little bit to fate,
Yeah.
right? I mean, after the refactoring, the company was sort of ready for a growth wave, but it was really sort of external events to a degree, right? COVID, the Queen's Gambit,
Yeah.
which brought this huge wave of growth. So, you know, what's like, if you had to say, how much of it of the success, do you sort of, I don't know, evaluate is related to fate? And how much is, you know, your skill?
71% fate. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. You know, we definitely benefited hugely. Not benefited. We were transformed by fate, right? That was so many different things, and we haven't had one wave. We have had wave after wave after wave of growth, and you know, at some point we look at ourselves and are like, how have we gotten so lucky? Or again, maybe back to the, you know, river of the universe guiding chess into, you know, mainstream. I have no idea, but we had COVID, which again was a horrible thing for the planet, but like made people go indoors and share, you know, a game that made them feel comfortable. We had the Queen's Gambit right on top of that. We had nothing to do with either of these things. Then the media was like fascinated by the growth of chess. And then we had nothing to do with that, but they were reporting on it. So all of those things, and then but then there were things that we did start to do, like PogChamps, which was our kind of YouTube chess event for streamers. But like a lot of that happened because they were into it, and then we kind of like saw that opportunity and built to it. And also you mentioned like a tough refactoring period, you know, kind of 2015 to 2017, 18 was a really hard time for us. Like our tech was so bad, and like we just couldn't quite get it together, but we did right in time for the first wave. And then we were overwhelmed by the wave, and we had to still fix things. And so we were very reactive, but we came out of like kind of the 2020, you know, 2018 had some growth, but and some of that we were part of. We built our Puzzle Rush. We did a great job on our World Championship coverage. So some of that was us, and we were in a good position then for 2020, COVID, Queen's Gambit, PogChamps, media. And then we had to just like metabolize all of that, right? And then came some other things which were lucky or unlucky. You know, we bought the Play Magnus Group company right at that same time. There was a giant cheating scandal, if you haven't heard about it. That created a media sensation. The media just loves chess drama. They just love it. And we're like huge beneficiaries of this, like any kind of drama. And so, but then also like we built a product that was ready for all these new people, right? People who watched the Queen's Gambit wanted to come in and learn. Well, we had a platform of learning for them. And then suddenly, you know, the short form content world exploded with TikTok and Instagram and YouTube shorts. And like all these young kids started to get into chess. Well, then suddenly kids in the classroom were just playing chess. And then we had our Mittens bot, and we had like our partnerships with creators. And so there were certain things that we were doing to kind of like steer and capitalize and help with. But, you know, those were all somewhat kind of reactive or kind of like right time, right place. So, you know, maybe 71% fate and 29% effort is the right ratio, but we've definitely been very fortunate, blessed, whatever you want to call it, and we've also been working our butts off to make sure that the product and the platform and the content is all right there ready for people who see chess somewhere and then can fall in love with chess through our platform. And that's really what we strive to do, and I think we've done a pretty decent job at it.
I remember my original investment thesis back when I started approaching companies was that chess and the internet are like a perfect match.
Yeah.
There couldn't be a better game because, as you said, it's simple, but it's complex. It's just fascinating, right? And the internet is a perfect medium for people to play without having to be in the same physical space, which is sort of a limitation of over-the-board chess, especially in today's world. And somehow I felt that it's so strange that, chess has really, I don't know, lost its flair, at least at the time when I invested, in 2012, 13, when we were doing these deals. It was not really in the mainstream media in any way.
Yeah.
And my thesis was that at some point, because it's sort of, it's like ebbs and flows, right?
Yeah.
It has to come back to the limelight. Something will happen, some events will bring it to the fore. And I feel that, obviously you had a passion for the game and for its ability to sort of teach, but in a way, why you thought it's a good business is also because you somehow inside also felt that, chess potentially has a big role to play in the world of internet and in our new sort of super connected world, right? So it's sort of both skill and luck, right? I think the fate element is the timing.
Yeah.
Because imagine if the wave happens in 15.
Yeah.
Right? You wouldn't have been ready.
Yeah.
But when it did happen in 20, you were ready. So to me, that's the fate element, right? And the skill is knowing that the wave will come and then actually building and understanding what to build. That's really skill.
Yeah.
And, it was, as I said, fascinating to see in action and then to actually see that the wave came and that, chess.com didn't go under. It got on the wave and then it managed to ride the wave and, even get better. But the other thing where I felt, as in sort of insider, but also as an outsider to a degree, right? I was a board member for a while and knew a lot, and then I wasn't, but still obviously being very connected with the company. I also felt that chess is a wonderful esport, right? And sort of as the esport revolution and the streaming was happening, and I remember that back in the day when, in 2012, I looked at it and spoke to all of these companies, they were all saying, oh, chess and TV never worked, right? In the old broadcasting world, there were several attempts to make it work, and it was just never good enough, right? And then with sort of the emergence of the streaming platforms, it all suddenly came together. Here was a format that people enjoyed. And then obviously you guys managed to sort of build on top of that with PogChamps and with all of these other things, right? And especially become the kings of the space, kings and queens of the space. So I don't know, I still feel that there's a lot of fate, and we have to be grateful to the creator or the powers that be, but also a lot of thinking went into it.
Yeah.
So kudos for that.
Thank you. I'll say that I think, chess at the time when we started chess.com, I think, saying this respectfully, I don't think that the world was doing service to the game, to its potential. I think the broadcasts and content was boring. I think that the interfaces were not appealing. I think that they were gatekeeping around the attitude of who's a chess player and who's not a chess player. And in comes me, kind of in the middle. I'm not a grandmaster, but I'm not a beginner. I'm kind of in the middle. And Jay, also maybe a little better chess player than me, but with technology and kind of a vision for building that. And we kind of looked at the landscape and felt like the world's changing, chess deserves better, technology is enabling things, like let's do this. And we like had an elevated vision beyond, I think, what was given to chess at the time from a product point of view. And then with Danny coming on right after, he had an elevated view of what chess could be from a content point of view, right? Not just like old, slow, like, it was like newer, faster, more irreverent, more inclusive, like more exciting, more just like anyone can be a chess player. We want to make it accessible and fun and exciting. And like not everybody liked it. Like people like rejected both our product vision and told us we were stupid and it was silly, and they rejected Danny's vision for what chess entertainment could be at the beginning. And most of like the existing chess world at the time was like chess.com is a joke, right? Like poor approach, like wrong approach, doesn't respect the game. And I would say like I think the greatest respect for the game that we had was unlocking the potential of the game to meet everybody where they are. And there is a place for 7-hour broadcasts. There's also a place for 7-second memes. There is a place for a beautiful wooden chessboard for you to play on. There's also a place for playing chess on the toilet, right? So we just expanded what that vision could be and really gave and unlocked, I think, the potential of what chess could be for this world. And we're not done yet.
Agreed. I think before chess.com, it was all top down, right? It was from the elite, from like the Grandmasters and the world champions, and then the pros and the semi-pros, right? They were the audience.
Yep.
And you were the only company who actually looked at it and said, no, it has to be bottom up, right? We start at the bottom.
Yep.
We service everyone.
Yep.
And definitely, again, with hindsight, we can say that you were absolutely right. And I remember when I came in, one of the goals was to somehow convey to the pros that what you're doing is actually interesting and sort of somehow make the platform attractive to them, right? And sort of looking back, it now seems so silly that we had to spend time and energy and effort to convince them to try the site and play on the site. Now they're all here.
Yeah.
Interesting journey.
Interesting.
15 minutes.
Thank you. Okay. One other area that obviously we have to touch is AI, right? Which is, it's the hot topic of the day. I remember 15 years ago, we were saying software is eating the world. Now we're saying AI is eating the world.
AI is eating software, so yes.
At least it's definitely eating software.
Yep.
We agree there. Okay. Chess was one of the first human activities which got exposed to AI in a big way, right? So, what are the lessons that you've learned at chess.com that you think could be valuable for other businesses who have their own, AI moment now? Because I feel that you've lived these lessons and you were facing these problems sometimes a decade earlier than what other businesses are facing today.
Yeah. I'm going to answer this with two different answers a little bit.
Okay.
One is the like very positive spin on this, and then the other one is maybe a less positive spin on this. The positive spin is that AI came into the game of chess, scared humans, suddenly was better than humans at the game, and everybody thought that chess was dead. And it actually did a little bit make the game more boring for a time. And that was going to kill the interest in the game. That was like the narrative. Like Kasparov lost to Deep Blue, like humanity's doomed, chess is going to go away. Okay, none of that happened. Like chess made humans better at chess. Chess is more interesting than ever, more inventive, better defense, better attacks, better ideas, better openings. Like it has improved the game. But that's because we use AI as tools for preparation, but it's still human to human. We have to come together and play the game. Of course, some people try to bring computers to the game. We have computers to catch the computers who are doing it. So anyway, but it did feel like an existential threat, but it ended up elevating the game. But and that was in a world where it was still humans doing it, right? So it was a tool for preparation, but were interfacing. It's a different world now because in the business ecosystem that we're facing, it doesn't have to ultimately be human to human, right? In some ways, like the gloves are off, and humans are prompting and engineering and doing things, but then the computers are going all the way. Whereas in chess, the computer stops here, then I sit at the board and play human. But in the new AI world, it is going all the way.
Well, let me stop you there for a moment.
Yeah.
I think what you're saying is fascinating because I think that the industries where there is still a human element, and we can call it human-centered AI, right, are the ones which are going to be not only resilient to AI, but which are going to be the main beneficiaries
For sure.
of AI, right? And you're right, industries where humans are not needed at all, right, and that can become completely AI dominated, are basically the ones that are under attack. But chess had its own watershed moment. I mean, we had, what was the name? AlphaGo.
Yeah.
Beating the computers, which were the old breed. That was sort of the first
neural nets.
Neural net machine, right? And I mean, it was a huge leap. I think that it was like the computers of the time were better than Magnus, but by, I don't know, maybe 400 elo points, right?
Yeah.
Which is basically a 95% probability of a win. And then these new machines were another 400 points better than the old machines, right? But that was more scary to me personally than the Deep Blue moment, because I thought, okay, now maybe they just solve chess, or I don't know, humans completely lose interest.
Yeah, I think that like the old way of AI was rules-based, heuristics, testing, A/B tree searches, all of that type of thing was like just inherently not as strong as the self-learning reinforcement models, neural nets, and now LLMs, which are drawing on just like vast inferences of information and patterns, which think about the world in a way that like is very different. And we're all kind of like, wait a minute, like this whole knowledge thing that's happening in AI is so big. And I think this is true. Like the internet came and changed jobs, right? But it was kind of like the old chess engines. And now AI is coming and it's like completely different, right? Like all content. You want to search for a recipe online, you ask AI, it summarizes all the websites that have recipes and gives you one. But what's going to happen to all those old sites that have recipes on it, right? What about like all, different services where you would, interact or go to a certain website? It's all being taken. What about the creativity of doing certain things? It's all being taken. So we're really, as a society, kind of standing by and watching as like these big AI companies take the vast human knowledge that we have and take it from humans, then repackage it and resell it to humans. Like this is scary, like from a cultural point of view, because it's going to fundamentally change the value creation and where people go and how people get things. And I'm not entirely sure how we're going to react. Now, I think that, we had for a long time, we had service jobs and blue collar jobs. And then there was this whole rise of like white collar or knowledge working jobs, right? Where people were going to college so they could learn to do this skill so that they could work in an office with knowledge workers. That is in huge trouble. Like entry-level legal, entry-level data analysis, like entry-level engineering, like all of these things, like suddenly we have these AI who can like do all of this. And so I think we're going to see the rise and fall of knowledge workers in some way. And I don't know, maybe there are going to be enough service jobs or I'm just saying this is a fundamental change. Like it is fundamental and it's not comparable to chess in some ways because the computers are going all the way. They're not stopping at the edge of the board. And so I think as a business owner and CEO, what I have to think about is like, how do we do AI the right way? And it's like human, tool AI, human, AI, human, and keeping humans in the loop is very important to me from a safety point of view, from a trust point of view, from a human point of view, from a creative point of view. So that's one thing that we're focused on is like keeping humans in the loop and humans first. We're also thinking about job preservation and how people can reskill within our companies so they can learn to use these tools and do less of what was repetitive, but do more of what's creative and growing. So these are things that we're thinking of as like the leaders of 600 plus people's jobs. Like how are we going to do this? And we think it's going to be an accelerant for us and for everybody inside the company. But on a global scale, I think a lot of us have to ask the questions as to like how are we going to see a fundamental change?
But I guess your first exposure to AI was through the cheat detection stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because people basically started using these AI machines.
Yeah.
So did you have to also make the cheat detection that you have to be run on AI, on like neural network AI?
There's a part that runs on that. There's a part that's also, there's many different parts to our anti-cheating kind of fair play system. I don't want to get into all of it, but yes, we have models that run. We have a lot of statistics and how like different thresholds. So some of it is a mix of kind of both of these different approaches. And then we also have a human review because sometimes the AI or the algorithm will say, oh, it's really close here. And then you have the human kind of go in and look at, looking at things that maybe the current models aren't trained on, but how the style of play, that move didn't feel very normal, or look at the time taken. And some of that's all inside the model, but when you kind of have to look at the details. So our harder cases, our cases for title players, like they all get a human review in the end.
So as a result, you were sort of an early user of the neural networks,
yeah.
right? Because the company had to adopt it into its product, right?
Yeah.
So you sort of felt its, limitations maybe to a degree, but also the big value that they can bring, right? So now as a big operator of a big company, right, that is, I suppose, adopting AI in all of the workflows of the business.
Yeah.
I don't know, what are like the key best in class advice that you can give to other founders, right? Which are like the AI tools that you found have had the biggest impact on chess.com becoming a more efficient, more successful company? And I don't know, in the last 6-12 months, as you're adopting more of this stuff.
I think opening up tools and just saying, hey, here's what's available, use it in the way that works well for you, helps people kind of ease into it rather than like a top-down mandate. You must use these tools in these ways and do this type of thing. That's culturally not aligned with us, and it's also not the most productive way. So we've seen much better, I think, AI kind of adoption culturally from just putting the tools out in front and saying like, enjoy like the playground that this is. This is very interesting.
So again, more sort of bottom-up approach.
Yeah. And then like...
What do you use yourself?
I use ChatGPT. I have a lot of conversations with it. I use Claude also for a co-work for like different ideas and kind of synthesizing things. That said, like a lot of my job is to stay on the human side of things because the AI doesn't have the sense and the touch and the taste of what's the ultimate like feel of things. And so I try to stay in the feels. I try and stay in the culture. So I'm not like the number one AI user at chess.com. I do use it. I am familiar with it, but I'm still primarily human.
Okay. Are you scared by AI at all?
I'll say this. I'm not Buddhist, but I'm familiar with some of it, and there's like two levels to this, right? In Buddhism, they talk about the first arrow and the second arrow of piercing you, right? So suffering. The first one is the concern, the suffering, the hurt, the worry. But then the second one is like the deeper dread that goes on in your mind. And so and that's a little esoteric, but I'm saying like, I'm concerned about AI in the future. I have worries about it, meaning like, what is going to happen? How can we be responsible? but then I don't let those concerns turn into dread and fear and like apocalyptic and replaying in my mind, oh my gosh, like the end is near. So I try to keep in that first, that first spot of like, this is uneasy for me. I'm uncomfortable here. I'm concerned and worried, but I don't let myself spin into like the second arrow of like suffering.
I'm not worried about myself at all.
For
but
sure.
I am worried about my kids as a father, right?
Absolutely.
So, and that's where it's much harder to avoid the second arrow.
Yeah.
Because, we grew up as knowledge workers,
Yeah.
right? And as you said, that's where the future is most clouded, right? Will the next generation of knowledge workers even have a job? And if not, then what are our kids supposed to do with their lives to be sort of, productive and useful for society at large?
Well, I think this is a very interesting thing because we say productive and useful, right? These are interesting terms because, like, how much of like the finance industry is actually productive and useful versus arbitrage, right? What are the things that we value as a society that are actually useful? Maybe this is the great equalizer that forces us to realize that what's actually useful to humanity is like human connection, education, caring for other people, like, building in more sustainable ways. And maybe AI comes out and like wipes out some of the jobs we thought were useful, but actually weren't necessarily like in humanity's best interests. So there's a possible silver lining here, though I think we will have bumpy roads to maybe get there.
Definitely, we will have a very bumpy road, but I am a financial intermediary, right?
Yeah.
That's my mission. But I always felt that I wanted to and also managed to give sort of a human element to it.
Yeah.
Right? That's how we connected. I remember when I left Seville, I said, look, if the result is that we're just friends, that's a great result.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's an important perspective, right? Whatever you do, we need to remember that we're humans first.
Yeah.
And everything else is, built on top. And it's like the human element that really makes it valuable, ultimately, in life.
Well, I appreciate you. You're a good human. Thanks for coming into my life. Thanks for being our first investor and believing in us. And thanks for having these great conversations.
Thank you, Erik. Great chat. And looking forward to seeing chess.com continue to grow, conquer the world, and hopefully, bring joy to people and also, help young people find focus. And, the reason why, and this is maybe the best place to finish, the reason why I love chess and why, as we discussed, it's insulated to AI, because the ultimate goal of chess is this: bringing two people at a board, sitting and interacting.
Yeah.
And that's great. And, that's what makes us unique.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Indeed.
sir.